April 1945. Berlin, once the proud heart of Hitler's empire, was a graveyard of stone and fire. The sky glowed red every night, not with sunsets, but with burning buildings. The thunder of Soviet artillery never stopped, and the city that once dreamed of a 1,000-year Reich had only days left to live. This is the story of the fall of Berlin, the final battle of World War II in Europe, the last stand of the Nazi Empire, and the moment when fear itself came crashing down. By early 1945, Nazi Germany was finished. The Western Allies had crossed the Rhine and were advancing from the west. The Red Army had smashed through Poland and was now only 40 miles from Berlin. Every day, 7,000 Soviet guns rained shells on the city. But Hitler refused to flee. He retreated underground, into the Führer bunker, a maze of concrete beneath the Reich Chancellery, and declared that Berlin would be defended to the last man, the last bullet, the last breath, last. His words sealed the fate of millions. In the streets above, chaos ruled. There were no more soldiers, only boys from the Hitler Youth and old men from the Volkssturm. They carried rusty rifles, barely trained, yet ordered to stop the Soviet army, 2.5 million strong, backed by 6,000 tanks and a sky full of vengeance. The citizens of Berlin, once worshippers of the Führer, now lived like rats in the ruins. They dug shelters, scavenged food, and waited for the inevitable. On April 16, 1945, the Soviets began the Battle of Berlin. It was not a battle. It was an apocalypse. The night sky exploded with fire as over 1 million shells were fired in just one day. The earth shook. The city screamed. Soviet Marshal Zhukov attacked from the east across the Oder River, while Marshal Konev's forces raced from the south, each determined to capture Berlin and end the war, or claim the glory. The Germans fought desperately, street by street, house by house. Every corner became a fortress, every window a sniper's nest, every subway tunnel a grave. Civilians were caught in the crossfire, families trapped in basements as the city above them disintegrated. A Soviet soldier later wrote, "We did not walk into Berlin. We crawled. We clawed our way through the fire." As the Soviets closed in, the streets of Berlin turned into rivers of rubble. Tanks crushed cars and corpses alike. Flamethrowers cleared entire buildings. The smell of smoke, blood, and decay filled the air. And yet, even as the city burned, Hitler refused to surrender. He believed Berlin would be saved by phantom armies that no longer existed. Deep underground, the mood inside Hitler's bunker turned from defiance to despair. He still held meetings, moving divisions on maps that were already destroyed. He screamed at his generals, accusing them of betrayal, while his secretary quietly burned papers that no longer mattered. The sound of explosions grew louder each hour. The bunker shook with every blast. Above them, the Chancellery Garden was nothing but a crater field. In the final week, Hitler's world collapsed completely. Goering fled. Himmler tried to negotiate with the Allies. Hitler flew into a rage, ordering their arrests. He had been betrayed, not by his enemies, but by his own disciples. On April 29th, he heard that Mussolini had been captured and executed. His body hung upside down in a public square. That was the moment Hitler knew what awaited him. He married Eva Braun that night, and the next day, April 30th, 1945, he shot himself as Soviet shells shook the bunker walls. Eva took poison beside him. Their bodies were burned in the garden above, a pitiful end to a man who once demanded worship as a god. When his staff heard the gunshot, no one spoke. They all knew. The Führer was dead, and with him, the nightmare was ending. As word of Hitler's death spread, the battle raged on. German resistance splintered, but still, pockets of diehards fought to the last bullet. Soviet troops stormed through the ruins toward the Reichstag, the symbol of Germany's power. For days, the building changed hands floor by floor, each room soaked in blood and smoke. On May 2, 1945, the last defenders surrendered. That night, Soviet soldiers climbed to the roof and raised the red flag of the USSR over the shattered Reichstag. It was the image seen around the world, the final proof that the Third Reich was finished. Berlin, the capital of tyranny, had fallen. When the guns finally fell silent, Berlin was no longer a city, it was a wound. 3 million people had lived there before the battle. When it ended, less than half remained, and many had no homes, no food, no future. Every street was rubble, bodies lay unburied, the air reeked of death, and amid the ruins, new horrors began. Revenge, chaos, and despair swept through the broken capital. Soviet soldiers looted and burned. Civilians hid from soldiers who had come not as liberators, but as avengers. The cost of Hitler's war was now paid, not by him, but by his people. A Red Army officer later wrote, "We had come to destroy fascism, but when I saw Berlin, I realized it had already destroyed itself." On May 7th, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The war in Europe was over. The empire built on hate, propaganda, and terror was gone. In just 12 years, it had conquered most of Europe and then consumed itself in madness. From the ashes of Berlin, a new world began to rise. The city was divided, east and west, a symbol of the Cold War that would follow for decades. But beneath the politics and ruins, Berlin remained haunted by the ghosts of millions who had suffered, fought, and died. To this day, beneath modern streets and cafes, fragments of the old city still lie buried, bunkers, tunnels, scars that time cannot erase. Berlin fell not just to armies, but to truth, the truth that tyranny cannot last, that fear eventually devours itself, and that even the mightiest empires end the same way, in silence and dust. Silence. Epilogue from the ashes. Today, Berlin stands reborn, a city of art, freedom, and remembrance. Where once there were walls of hate, now stand memorials of peace. Where the Führer once hid in the dark, children now play in sunlight. Each April, flowers are laid at the sites of ruin, not to honor power, but to remember pain. Because the fall of Berlin was not just the end of a war, it was the end of an illusion that fear can rule forever, that one man can command history, that lies can outlive truth. They cannot. The fall of Berlin was not just Germany's defeat, it was humanity's awakening. As one survivor later said, "When Berlin fell, the world finally exhaled. The darkness lifted, and we began to see each other again." April 1945. Berlin burned, the empire of fear collapsed, and from its ashes, the world was born anew. History remembers the fall of Berlin not as a victory of one side over another, but as a warning to all. that no empire built on hatred, no regime built on fear can ever truly stand against time.